Chick-fil-A is a very popular fast food restaurant started locally in Hapeville, Georgia in 1967. 57 years after founder Truett Cathy began selling his famous chicken sandwiches, the restaurant chain has over 3,000 restaurants in the U.S., Puerto Rico, and Canada. Chick-fil-A generated 21.5 billion in sales in 2023, which is nearly double its sale volume from 2018. It had a 14.7% sales growth in 2023 and outperformed its nearest competitors in the chicken restaurant industry, Popeyes and KFC. It is important to note that Chick-fil-A draws these impressive sales figures while remaining closed on Sundays in all locations. However, Chick-fil-A lags behind those competitors in international expansion. KFC boasts 30,000 locations globally. In 2023, KFC opened nearly 2,700 new restaurants in 96 countries. In contrast, Chick-fil-A has restaurants in only 2 countries outside of the U.S. and none on any continent other than North America. They have 6 locations in Puerto Rico and 13 locations in Canada. The difference in international growth between Chick-fil-A and KFC is dramatic. Chick-fil-A has ambitions to begin a larger expansion into the international market. In addition to new locations in Canada and Puerto Rico, Chick-fil-A announced in September 2023 that it will open restaurants in the United Kingdom in 2025, with plans to open 5 stores there in the first 5 years. They also expect to open a location in Asia in 2026. There are many questions about how well Chick-fil-A will be able to transfer their success from the U.S. market to the Asian and European markets. Let's look at the successes and failures of Chick-fil-A's recent international ventures in England and Canada, and then consider advice to help them thrive in their new markets. Chick-fil-A's first attempt at opening a restaurant in the United Kingdom was not successful. The restaurant was opened at a mall in Reading, England, a suburb of London, in October 2019. After only 8 days, the leasing agency for the mall announced that it would not extend a lease to Chick-fil-A after their current 6-month lease expired. The quick failure at this location was not due to the food, the service, or the local management. The problem seemed to center on the low public image of the Chick-fil-A Corporation regarding their policy and corporate leadership opinions. Only a few days after the doors were opened at the new location in UK, the local LGBT organization Reading Pride began protesting in front of the restaurant and calling for a boycott. The organization accused Chick-fil-A of making donations to charities that were hostile to LGBT rights. They based this accusation on donations by Chick-fil-A to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, the Paul Anderson Youth Home, and the U.S. Salvation Army. As a defense, in a statement to the BBC News outlet, Chick-fil-A stated, "Our giving has always focused on youth and education. We have never donated with the purpose of supporting a social or political agenda. There are 145,000 people, black, white, gay, straight, Christian, non-Christian, who represent Chick-fil-A." Despite this defense, the Reading Pride continued to protest until the Chick-fil-A restaurant closed its doors in their town. Their corporate donation policy clearly led to conflict with the local community and their financial loss. A second factor that contributed to the failure of the English restaurant was public statements made by the CEO of Chick-fil-A a few years earlier. Chick-fil-A's founder, Truett Cathy, based much of his business principles on his personal Christian beliefs. These ideals of honesty, customer service, and hard work served the corporation well. However, in 2012, Truett Cathy's son, Dan Cathy, the CEO at the time, famously made multiple public statements on his views against same-sex marriages. This personal opinion from the corporate leader drew anger and protest at U.S. restaurants. The LGBT community in America targeted Chick-fil-A as a symbol of conservative opinion in opposition to their freedom. The statements of Dan Cathy caused the restaurant chain to draw national and international negative publicity. The third contributor to the failure of the English restaurant is simply that Chick-fil-A had obviously not done enough to repair their image before launching a restaurant in the United Kingdom. 7 years had passed since Dan Cathy's unpopular statements in opposition to gay marriages. It is clear to see that the LGBT community in Reading, England still viewed Chick-fil-A as a threat to their views and agenda. In choosing the location for their first restaurant in the United Kingdom, Chick-fil-A should have considered how the damage to their brand image would impact their acceptance by the locals in Reading. Perhaps they could have avoided their failure in the UK by choosing a different location or delaying the opening until they had sufficiently repaired their public image. Ultimately, Chick-fil-A's failures in England led to success. Perhaps the most important success is the lessons that the corporation learned. They took a bad publicity situation and changed themselves for the better. In November 2019, Chick-fil-A announced that it would focus its annual donations to a small group of organizations with emphasis on education, homelessness, and hunger. Notably, the Salvation Army and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, along with some 80 other organizations, were removed from their donation list. Also, in November 2019, they created the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for their corporation to create a more diverse workforce and a culture of belonging. On their webpage, dedicated to this area, they promote their ideals of valuing differences, creating equal access, and their goal of being better together. They highlight owner-operators from different cultures, religions, and backgrounds. Chick-fil-A has made strides to diversify their corporation. In addition to these corporate policy changes, the leadership at Chick-fil-A took note of how their personal views damaged the brand reputation. Dan Cathy made a statement that the bottom line is we have a responsibility here to keep the whole of the organization in mind, and it has to take precedence over the personal expression and opinion on social issues. In 2021, Andrew Cathy, grandson of the founder, became the CEO, and he continues to promote inclusion as a corporate policy. Chick-fil-A had a more successful international launch in Canada where potential failures were converted into wins. The same year it opened its restaurant in Reading, England, Chick-fil-A opened its first restaurant in Canada. Located in Toronto, the chain was met with protests in the fall of 2019 that echoed the same anger that was displayed in England by the LGBT community. Protests were based on the same corporate policies and opinions of Chick-fil-A leaders that showed bias against gay marriages and the LGBT agenda. However, the failures of these unpopular corporate policies and statements did not result in the closure of the new restaurant in Toronto. Instead, the protests were short-lived. Some even suggested that the protests at the new location in Toronto increased publicity and drew curious people into the restaurant as first-time customers. Perhaps the local population of this modern city situation near the U.S. border was more tolerant of differences in opinions or less interested in letting social issues influence their restaurant choices. The actions that corporate Chick-fil-A began to make to remedy their failures in Reading, England, probably had similar beneficial effects on their location in Toronto. A second obstacle that turned from potential failure to success was the move to a new country. Although Canada is an international market, its proximity to the United States made the step into a new nation slightly easier. The nearest border crossing from the US to Canada is only 80 miles south of Toronto. This allowed for Chick-fil-A to create efficient supply chains to bring their branded signature items into the new Toronto market. Launching new restaurants in a neighboring nation had other advantages. The culture of Canada is very similar to that of the US, with a shared language, similar economic standing, and interconnected populations. Many Canadians travel back and forth across the border with the US. They had experience with Chick-fil-A from trips to the US. This gave Chick-fil-A brand recognition and popularity before it even opened its doors in Toronto, despite Canada being a foreign market. A third potential for struggle that the Toronto venture was able to successfully navigate was the local competition within the Canadian chicken restaurant industry. Despite KFC and Popeyes both having multiple locations in Toronto, Chick-fil-A was able to carve out a fan base among consumers and gain part of the market there. Although Chick-fil-A is still small in comparison with their American chicken restaurant rivals, they now have 13 restaurants in Toronto's province of Ontario, with plans to expand across the country to other provinces in the coming year. Chick-fil-A can learn much from both the failures and successes it had in England and Canada as it begins to plan its next international venture. The next global venture is planned for Asia in 2025. As Chick-fil-A prepares to launch its first restaurant in Asia, the first important step is to choose a good location. Andrew Cathy, the current CEO, said that the ideal location needs to have a stable economy, dense population, and a demand for chicken. We recommend that Chick-fil-A launch their first Asian restaurant in Singapore. This city-state meets all of Cathy's requirements. Singapore is a high-income economy. Their 2023 gross national income was over $70,000 per capita. They are known as one of the most livable cities in Asia with a population of over 6 million people. KFC has been doing business in Singapore since 1977 and has over 80 restaurants there, which shows a customer base that likes chicken. In fact, it seems that Chick-fil-A has already picked Singapore as a strategic city for expansion, and they are already in the process of interviewing and hiring leadership there. Our first advice to Chick-fil-A as they expand to Asia is to be true to the strategies that have made them successful in the U.S. One example of this is their owner-operator model for new restaurants. Chick-fil-A has avoided publicly trading their company or allowing their restaurants to become passive investments in someone's business venture portfolio. They have high standards for the selection of each owner and rarely allow an owner to run more than one or two Chick-fil-A restaurants. The financial obligation to start a new restaurant only requires $10,000, which allows enthusiastic average business people to be in the running for store ownership. This combination of high standards has worked well in the U.S. and can help the new Asian stores to choose excellent new owners. Another attribute of Chick-fil-A's success in the U.S. is their simple menu. While other competitors have elaborate menus that are often modified, Chick-fil-A has been successful by being known for its signature items like the chicken sandwich and waffle fries. Remaining true to their simple menu helps to control costs and avoid expanding the number of ingredients and supplies needed to support their food production. Their simple menu also builds recognition and hopefully demand for their unique food selection. Our second advice to Chick-fil-A as they branch out into Asia is to work from the beginning to establish brand recognition. A strategic advertising campaign is key to their success. Singapore is a wealthy city with a well-educated English-speaking population. Based on this profile, Chick-fil-A can approach advertising there with similar tactics that work well in other wealthy urban areas. A perfect example of a successful advertising launch is currently going on in Singapore, where Chick-fil-A hosted a pop-up event June 26 through 28, 2024. At this pop-up event, hosted at a local Singapore shopping area, their goal was to build excitement for their potential opening in the area. They offered their classic meal of a chicken sandwich, waffle fries, and a drink. The red and white colors and logo of Chick-fil-A were on balloons, table decor, signs, and greeters. They had photo booth areas set up to showcase their signature sauces and to promote posting pictures to their new Instagram page, which they creatively named Chicken and Smiles. They even promoted their unique brand of politeness with the phrase "My pleasure" on their Instagram post. In the modern city of Singapore, the use of social media and a web page dedicated to Chick-fil-A in their city-state can be a successful place to advertise and reach their potential customer base. All these details are terrific advertising ideas that can help the new Asian Chick-fil-A build brand recognition and promote their signature foods and image. Our third advice for those launching new Chick-fil-A's in Asia is to embrace the new culture and connect to the local community. This can be done by locally sourcing the chicken they use and communicating that through their advertising. Another suggestion is to donate and support local charities and organizations. For example, on Chick-fil-A's website for their Puerto Rican restaurants, they highlight that the corporation donated $275,000 to two Puerto Rican nonprofit organizations to specifically target hunger and educational needs among local children. Having a website dedicated solely for Chick-fil-A in Puerto Rico is a way of connecting to the local people. On this page, they introduce each new restaurant owner and draw a connection between the corporation and the new Puerto Rican owner. Chick-fil-A is both popular and financially successful in its home market. Their unique combination of food, atmosphere, cultural involvement, and branding has served them well and helped them gain customer loyalty. With close attention to their past failures and successes, plus strategic planning for their future global expansions, Chick-fil-A has the potential to spread their popularity and profit around the world.